Survival horror is a very tricky and niche genre of games. Many modern horror games have survival elements, but they don't meet a very specific criteria. Today's game, Daymare 1998, is a good example of a modern survival horror game. To explain, it meets my 3 criteria of a survival horror game. 1. You must have a limited inventory system. This is a no-brainer. Having a limited inventory space forces the player to make decisions on what to carry on them. 2. You must be able to combat enemies in the game in some form. Being unable to combat enemies prevents the player from being able to extract themselves from situations of their own making. Enemies will also force them to use resources they might not otherwise. Resources should be plentiful, yet scarce. What I mean is that there should be enough ammo in the game to kill all the enemies, but not much more. Your shots need to count in order to build tension. Now, while Daymare is a good example of modern survival horror, it isn't exactly a BAFTA award winner. In fact, seeing as it is on the show, it's pretty jank some of the time. But to understand this game more, we need to talk a little bit about the people who made it. The developers are known as Invader Studios, but they were previously known as Invader Games, a small bunch of devs in Italy who were working on a project called Resident Evil 2 Reborn. Ignoring the golden rule of fan game development, they released a short technical demo that gained a lot of attention, including that of Capcom. In fact, Capcom themselves reached out to the small team of hooligans, but not in the normal way. According to co-founder Michael Gioni, Capcom didn't choose a legal cease and desist, but an invitation. To make a long story short, the Redfield Bros took a trip to Osaka to meet with Capcom producers. There, Capcom politely told them to stop working on their fan project, but not for the really cease and desist ways you would actually think. Capcom revealed to them that they already had a remake of RE2 in development, along with Resident Evil 7. Gioni says of the meeting, "It was a great honor and experience. They asked our opinion about their official remake and Resident Evil 7. These nerds did such a good job on no budget that Capcom had to show them all the goodies to convince them to stop." Possibly the greatest thing to come from this faithful meeting was that Invader Studios was encouraged not to throw away everything that they had made. Instead, the producers at Capcom encouraged them to make their own IP. 4 years and a failed Kickstarter later, we will get Daymare 1998. Today I'm playing the game in the 90s mode on the Daymare difficulty on a PS4 controller. I didn't find it overly hard, but I'll discuss it in the gameplay section. And don't trust the lies that are the ending score. I played this game for longer than 8 hours. I have close to 13 hours of footage from this game. Let's talk about the presentation. The visuals look fine in-game. It's quite apparent that these guys were working on a tight budget. Textures can be flat overall, but the lighting does its best to make up for it. But some things are definitely not right. Water is a jelly-looking substance. Textures will pop in and out in places. That Fat Man zombie is holding a bat. Sometimes the lighting does a great job at setting the mood. Sometimes it diminishes the impact by creating weird effects. It's a mixed bag overall. It isn't a big detractor for me. These guys are a bunch of passionate nerds, so you should expect to see a lot of movie references on the walls and in the environment, not to mention all the Resident Evil illusions. They wear their heart on their sleeve, and I appreciate that. It's what I might call to be a passion game. It's not groundbreaking, but the people who made it made a game, not a product. What is quite possibly my favorite reference in this game is this piece of wall graffiti. This is the little girl target that Agent J shoots during the testing scene in Men in Black. It's stupidly specific and a data reference, and I love it. Daymare does nail the horror tone at points. The hospital in particular is probably my favorite part of the game. It's moody, everything is dimly lit, and there are zombies crawling all over the place. I feel like I could and would be attacked around every corner, and sometimes I was. Perhaps the most disappointing thing is the optimization of this game. I had a hard time getting it to run at a steady 1080p, 60 FPS, playing on a mix of high and ultra settings. I had to scale down to high and still had occasional frame drops. And my machine isn't a complete toaster, I have a 1070 Ti. What I'm saying is I had to fine tune it a bit more than I had hoped given the general visual state of the game. Though I will say despite this, I only had the game crash on me twice, both times in a replicable crash involving a puzzle downtown with Raven. The sound design is pretty good for the zombies. They sound like zombinos, and the other monsters make some horrifying noises too. Though their sound mixing is very weird. Zombies in other rooms or down the street will sound like they're right next to you. The music is also all over the place. It's this weird mixture of classic Resident Evil music and electronic noise. I found myself enjoying some of it. I also hope you enjoy hearing this beeping noise when you're on low health. Your off-brand Pip-Boy will keep screaming at you until you get your health above 40%. It's fantastic to hear. Now I can't move on to the gameplay without first mentioning the voice acting, which also requires me to talk about the cutscenes. They're atrocious. From the lighting, to the models, to the voice acting, it's all terrible. These guys took all the wrong lessons from Hunt Down the Freeman when it comes to making cutscenes. The voice acting in particular is very cheesy and quite bad most of the time, but these are the risks you run when parts of your cast may have only one credit to their name, and it's this game.
I feel bad about not being able to take you to the Cherry Blossom Feast.
I will say though that Raven, Liev, and Sarah are probably the best of the voice cast.
Who is this?
So if the presentation is a bit off, how's the gameplay? Well, I'm happy to say it's the best part of this game. This game plays scarily like the Resident Evil 2 remake. It's a third-person shooter with a limited inventory system. There are puzzles that range from find the item, to stupid easy, to I spent an embarrassingly long time on them. Resources are scarce, but there are enough that you can deal with every enemy in the game, if you don't miss. Zombies will soak damage in the chest, but headshots have the possibility of exploding heads. Dead zombies have blood pools. This game follows the classic Resident Evil formula very closely. However, where it breaks from the formula is in its melee combat and its reload system. I personally find both additions to be welcome, if perhaps they need some work. The melee is a pretty quick, non-lethal hit that will stun an enemy. If you hit the stunned enemy again, they will go down for a few seconds. This is very useful for clearing a path and saving ammo. The reload system is pretty neat and probably the most unique part of this game. You pick up boxes of ammo and have clips to put the ammo in, because you can't just put bullets in your gun. There are also multiple types of rounds to pick up, some dealing more damage than others. There are also two types of reload, quick and slow. Their names are accurate representations of their speed. When you perform a quick reload, you will drop the magazine onto the floor, whereas doing a slow reload, you will put the spent clip into your inventory. This mechanic creates a situation where I began to methodically reload all my clips at the end of the battle for justified fear that I would run out of usable bullets in a fight. This mechanical load forced me to plan out my encounters, preventing my favorite tactic of fly by the seat of my pants. My main complaint with the reload system is that I cannot unload an empty magazine from my gun. It's a very limited factor if you only have one clip for the weapon. I specifically had a situation where I was unable to use my Magnum despite having a box of bullets in my inventory. You also cannot load different types of rounds into the same magazine. This led to my inventory being a bit more cluttered than I would have liked that sometimes. Weapon variety is also a bit limited. Each character can hold up to 3 guns, a pistol, long gun, and a heavy gun. All the pistols deal low amounts of damage, but they're enough to keep the regular zombies at bay. Long guns include the shotgun and MP5. MP5 is okay, but is disappointingly a single fire weapon. I wanted my gun to go pew pew, not pew pew. Shotguns will typically annihilate regular zombies, and are my main tool for dealing with problems. The Magnum is as the Magnum should. There are 2 kinds in this game, a .44 revolver and the Deagle. These guns annihilate regular zombies, but don't do quite as much damage to problems as I may have hoped. It often seemed like they just shrugged off my bullets. The enemy variety is a bit sparse, but they tend to fall into one of 3 categories: regular zombies, problems, and bosses. Regular zombies are everywhere. Problems are enhanced zombies, become either super huge and quick, or gaming a knife arm and can spit acid. There are few bosses in the game, and thank God, because those guys absorb bullets. A funny thing this game points out is that each enemy has a weakness if you can find it. I most often found that lead was the most effective zombie deterrent. I also would like to point out how overdramatic some of these zombie death animations are. I find them to be hilarious if a bit out of place. The healing system is very much like that of classic Resident Evil games, but somewhat simplified. Combine items to make a healing item. Combine those items to make a super healing item. Healing occurs over time rather than right away, and your health is in the form of a life bar with a percentage meter. You'll see this a lot when you get grabbed by the zombinos. There's also a stamina boost that I use rarely, and a perception boost I use twice. The stamina makes it so you can hit zombies more often, and the perception boost makes items easier to see. I didn't use the perception boost nearly at all, instead opting to use them to trade for override cables. You use the override cables to access lockers and doors that would otherwise be inaccessible. These often contain loot and were almost always worth opening. The hacking system is pretty simple: line things up, hit the button. I found the puzzles to be pretty great for the most part. They often required me to pay attention to my surroundings. I didn't find the combination of 90s mode and Daymare difficulty to be overly hard. Most of my deaths were in rooms I assumed were safe, combat encounters I didn't properly plan for, or when I would purposely suicide because I had wasted resources. However, I will freely point out the dick moves that are hallucinatory zombies. It is a mechanic that ties itself to the story, but sometimes the zombies you see are fake and will disappear after being shot or hit. There might be a way to tell if a zombie is real or not without dealing some kind of damage to them, but I couldn't figure it out. The fact that I can't tell them apart from a real zombie makes it feel like a real dick move. So more often than not, I would waste around checking to see if zombies were real or not. Second place for dick moves is zombies around corners. They trained me to play better, but I didn't appreciate the process. Pivoting to the story, you play as 3 characters: Liev, a loudmouth Hades member and colloquially known as Not Hunk, Raven, a Hades pilot, and Samuel Walker, a local resident of Keensight where most of the game takes place. Most of the characters lack depth and I didn't care for most of them. The main crux of the story is that Hexacore Biogenetics, headquartered in Keensight, had an accident at a secret facility and their zombie gas is now on the loose. The story overall is fairly bland and forgettable up until the last minute, but that's all spoiler talk. The game is split into 5 chapters that take place in various parts of the town. There's some reuse of levels, but they're remixed to feel familiar yet different. Each chapter is wildly varying in length, but usually clocking in between 1 and 3 hours of gameplay each. Before I move on to spoilers, I want to talk about notes in this game. They're very much in the style of Resident Evil, but they also do this weird thing where they give me a password and a web page link. Odd, but I go to the link and find nearly half of this game's story is on this website. You can view each note by inputting its associated password. It's neat in theory, but I do not enjoy it in practice. Seeing a URL link and a password takes me out of the game. I didn't want to go to a website to know more about your game. I'd like to know more about the game in the game itself. It was frustrating to clear a room to get a note only for that note to tell me to go elsewhere. And given the fact that it's on a website, that leads to the potential that website could go down permanently one day. Then those who would play this game in the future will get a very fragmented view of the story. Skip to avoid spoilers. The story of this game is rather baffling at times, which isn't good for a narrative-driven survival horror game.
Baby, you just stay right here.
We start playing as Liev, dealing with an outbreak at a secret company facility. After securing the zombie gas and prepping the self-destruct, we get out of there. On board, Liev and Major Sandman get tested with one another. Sandman goes to check on the zombie gas as Raven overcomes his PTSD of flying. A shot rings out and we find Liev holding Sandman at gunpoint, whom also has a nasty virus scar across his face now. It appears to be the classic double cross for money from a rival corporation move. The helicopter crashes shortly after, unleashing zombie gas onto the town. We cut to Sam, where he experienced firsthand his strange mental condition that causes him to see hallucinations, Daymare syndrome. Sam's levels are where you experience the fake zombies, so in the end they're thematically appropriate, if still a dick move. Sam sees Sandman holding his wife's corpse and throws Sam out the window. This ignites Sam's quest for revenge that takes him to the town hospital. It's at the hospital where Liev gets butchered by the Sandman, and then Sam acquires his Pip-Boy. It's at the hospital where we learn that Hexacore and the US government have been experimenting on the townspeople for a very long time, and that Sam's Daymare condition is a result of this experimentation. Sandman escapes and Sam leaves to find him. We jump to Raven awakening and attempting to get back to Hexacore's headquarters. You travel through the downtown and enter the sewers because of course there's a sewer level. Wait, that's not my joke. Before reaching your crashed helicopter where you have one of 2 boss fights in the game. Upon victory, you make your way to the local dam, which also serves as Hexacore's headquarters. There you find everyone zombified. And it'll jump to Sam traveling through most of the same downtown areas, either backwards or in a variety of remix ways. This is probably the weakest part of the game for me, as I had just been here on the previous level. Also, a part of this level makes no sense geographically. We exit a door from the city, into a garden, and suddenly walk out of a gate in the woods. I don't know if this is bad level design, or if this was meant to be intentional, making us question everything Sam sees. Probably just jank though. The final chapter has Raven exploring the dam. While trying to find a way out of the dam, we come across what I have dubbed to be not Nemesis, the zombified remains of Agent Liev. Apparently, experimental drug in the Hades members' systems resulted in weird mutations of the zombie virus. I have to say, it is in this final chapter where the game goes off the rails. For one, Liev soaks more ammo than any other enemy in the game. The devs know it too because they give you boxes of ammo in both the arenas where you fight not Nemesis. Personally, it's a bit jarring to have gone from watching my ammo counts and managing my magazines to running around dropping one magazine after another, pausing only to grab more magazines from the boxes. But not Nemesis goes down eventually, even if Sandman has to finish him off for you. After a very confusing final scene that is a Mexican standoff between Sandman, Raven, and a very deranged Sam, whom is currently experiencing visions of his wife telling him to shoot. Sandman talks about how Sarah was important to him, suddenly implying that they knew each other. Sandman pulls a gun, screen fades to black, and we hear a gunshot. It's pretty bizarre for game endings, but it's contextualized a bit by the epilogue after the credits. Super spoiler alert, because this info changes the entire context of the game for you otherwise. I recommend not watching this bit and playing the game for yourself in order to see it. Throughout the game, we've been seeing hints that things are not all that they seem. With multiple references to betrayals by staff of Hexacore, the involvement of another biogenic company called Kurosanu, and a mysterious voice in some cutscenes only known as the Cleaner, for most of the game, none of this is important, merely interesting backstory. But when the Cleaner logs into his computer in the epilogue is when I personally had the rug ripped out from underneath me. We see a variety of video files, audio files, and text files that help to contextualize the story we just played. As it turns out, Sandman was the one who betrayed the company, killing Crane and nearly getting the better of Agent Liev. Sandman intentionally caused the outbreak at Keensight on behalf of the Kurosanu Corporation. This was for the explicit purpose of revealing Hexacore's dirty secrets and removing a powerful competitor. We also learned that Sam's wife was one of Hexacore's daughters and was assigned to observe Sam before she actually fell in love with him. It is through her audio log and text file that we learn more about Sandman as a person, that his daughter died of a disease that Hexacore could have helped out with, but had refused. And a final shot shows a girl in the tube. Now my interpretation of this is that Kurosanu cloned Sandman's daughter as payment for bringing down their greatest rival. Now I won't lie, I thought this game's story was pretty trash right up until I saw Sandman shoot Crane. But the fact that seeing that one piece of information started making puzzle pieces come together in my head was a pretty great moment for me. I have to give the developers credit here because I did quite enjoy this. Nothing feels like it was completely out of left field, and I felt I understood the characters' motivations for the most part in the end. But I still have questions. Who got shot in the end? Why didn't Sandman just abandon Raven once he had dealt with Liev? Who is the Cleaner? I'm sure the only answers I'll get will come from a sequel, if ever. Liev is the character I think I like best in the story. I want to say that I felt contempt for Liev in the beginning. He seemed shallow and one-dimensional. But now I only feel pity after seeing the environment in which he lived in. Everyone was bad people, but Liev tried to acknowledge it, unlike the rest. Everyone else was either a scheming dirtbag or just actively lying to everyone around them. Once you finish the base game, there's still more to do. Hades' Dead End is a mercenary style mode where you have to exploit a bunch of secret company files. Liev is the star of the show here. Items are strewn through the environment as normal and zombies will respawn. I only did a run through of the hospital level, but I found it fairly easy in comparison to my regular playthrough. I had more ammo than I knew what to do with. My final thoughts on this game are that it's a jank wonder that I found myself having fun with overall, but it definitely has its problems. I can't help but wonder that if with more budget and polish, what these guys could have done. But if you want to find out for yourself if you've enjoyed the game, I would suggest playing the demo. The demo includes the first chapter of the game and is about an hour in length. I personally played the demo and then picked the game up on sale for about $10 afterwards. Daymare 1998 is worth a look if you're a fan of survival horror games, but to a normal audience this may be too niche and jank to justify spending $30 on. But if you're a fan of non-shitty survival horror games, this would be one to look at. Thanks for watching.